been hearing about the plans for the arrests ever since 2009. And Q has indicated that they may not release it on the day they said they would, and they're doing that for a reason. I actually believe, and I will say this on camera, even though it's going to be a YouTube video, they have completely modified YouTube. If anybody out there watching this, I'll talk to you, the viewer, directly. Everybody's got to remember, we are all in this together. This is not just about the UFO community and guys who talk about Q or Trump or anything like that. It is literally every independent creator who has tried to do stuff on YouTube. The scope, I believe, the scope of what we are going to see will surprise even those of us who have expected quite a bit.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Edge of Wonder. And man, do we have a show for you today. We are with none other than David Wilcock, who we have been getting more messages that I care to share with everyone out there.
Where's David Wilcock?
Asking where this guy has been. And David, where have you been? Because you've been a busy guy, haven't you?
Well, yeah. In all honesty, first of all, I do want to apologize to my audience for the delay. I've been doing this since 1996, so it's 24 years come January, basically. And with that in mind, I worked for so many years, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I never really slowed down. I have been targeted by a Luciferian gang-stalking operation that in many ways culminated with the Contact in the Desert event, where we had severe threats to my physical safety, and then those people ended up in the room at my talks, and we had an unarmed but nonetheless formidable security presence there. I did receive heckling on my panel from a person in the audience who became very aggressive, started yelling from the audience. And shortly after that, I had to really dive into finishing my book. I spent a month in Canada, as I usually do in September. That was very restorative, and when I got back from Canada, it's just been really full-on working on the book, and I just finished it. Thank God. I finished it
Wow.
about 2 weeks ago. I immediately, the day after, went to Las Vegas and I got to meet Steven Tyler again.
Wow.
He and I have been friends. He came to my 40th birthday party, so I got to see him he's doing a residency in Las Vegas at the Park MGM Hotel right now.
It's pretty amazing. So is Steven Tyler like really into this kind of content?
Apparently he's got audiobook CD of my latest book that's just in his Jeep when he's in Hawaii, and that's all he listens to. And apparently he and his girlfriend have also binge-watched all of my television episodes. So
Wow.
That's awesome.
that's a
pretty
lot
amazing.
of stuff.
Man, so the book that you've been writing, did you want to share with everyone a little bit about what that's going to be about?
Sure. This was a very difficult book to write. I would even say the most difficult book to write. And the reason for that is that as you become more public, which I've done over the last few years, the stakes become a lot higher. It's a lot more challenging because you have so many people scrutinizing everything that you say and do, and nothing that I've ever been through in my life aroused as much public anger and ridicule as the period of my life that I wrote about for this book, Awakening the Dream. Namely, I would say the period of the years 1994 through 1996. That period of time is when I started to receive dreams that were very profound, that were prophetic of the future, and were ultimately leading me towards what turned into a telepathic connection with what I would consider to be my higher self. I found out I graduated college in 1995, and everybody knows what I've said about the UFO disclosure that I had at the beginning of 1993, where I found out that UFOs are real. That was shortly after I had stopped being an addict. I was primarily addicted to marijuana. I never really had an alcohol problem. And I completely stopped all usage of substances. And in the aftermath of that, only a few months later, I found out that UFOs were real. And I had already started writing my dreams down every morning by this point. So one of the things that was really fascinating was I went back into these handwritten dream notebooks that I had kept and that I had never read since the dreams came in, believe it or not. I just got really busy and my life got crazy and all these things were happening. And in my house in Colorado, I had all these dream books in the safe that I'd never actually gone through. And so I spent 2 long periods working on that pretty much exclusively and going through those dream notebooks and rereading them all and identifying the most amazing dreams that were actually showing where my life was going to go in the future. So what I've done with this new book is to go through the period of time where I'm having these dreams and I keep showing you, I show the dream and then I show how I analyzed it and what it means. And I find this to be very fascinating because as you see the way that I crack the dream language down, anybody who reads this will, in the course of reading the book, learn the language of dreams. And I feel that dreams are like treasure chests from your higher self. It's literally any one dream you have is the most important thing you need to know at that particular time. So when you can remember them, now you have to decipher them. Well, one of the main things that this book, Awakening the Dream, is going to do is make it so that without doing any work, you will understand how your dreams speak to you and what the language is, and you'll be able to decipher any dream that you have once you've read this book. And I've never done anything like that before.
Wow.
That's awesome.
It really is amazing.
I think there's so many people I talk to all the time that need help with that. That's really cool.
There's also a whole lot of very fascinating future prophecy stuff that happened. And it does culminate towards the end of the book with me actually developing a telepathic contact through the protocols of remote viewing that leads to actual downloading of verbal information similar to Edgar Casey's readings or similar to the Law of One or the Seth books by Jane Roberts. So there's a lot of really great material from that at the end, including some very stunning prophecies of 9/11, some prophecies of what's happening to us right now. All the things that are happening right now to me and in the world were prophesied back as early as 1996 to 99. That was kind of the window. But also, another thing that I want to point out to you guys is I oscillate between talking about dream analysis and then getting into a variety of scientific investigations of stuff that I've literally never done before. I've never done it in any television shows, videos, conferences. It's all new material. And that's hard to do. At this point, to reinvent myself yet again, to come up with even more information that I haven't already done, and then have a whole book of new information is very difficult. But I actually found, by going back to the old research from 94 to 96, some really great stuff that I'd forgotten about.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Kind of going back on Q, I know this is kind of the things, like one of the, like some of the stuff that the haters and the deniers are saying. It's like, well, you guys predicted all these arrests are going to happen, and what arrests happen, you know? So I kind of want to give you a chance to kind of reflect on this, your understanding about this. But I mean, what we tell people is like, look, Epstein got arrested. This, you know, now he's dead. This was like a humongous, giant domino that just fell now. We haven't heard from like George Soros from, I don't think he's been public from like last over
Soros
a year.
and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, and there's
too.
a whole, we're kind of keeping a list of these officials we haven't heard from in quite a while. I mean, then you have John McCain who died. Then you have Bush Sr. who died. And Q hinted to both of their deaths before they died.
Constantly.
So yeah. Anyway,
Well,
just wanted to give you a chance.
yeah, and I mean,
Talk about
right
it.
as you guys are taping with me, this is the day we're taping is December 4th. Who knows what's going to happen, because we're supposedly days away from this FISA declassification that everybody's been waiting for. And Q has indicated that they may not release it on the day they said they would, and they're doing that for a reason. And they talked about limited ammunition, and I think what that means is they want the opponent to fire all the ammunition first before they release this. But you guys, I mean, one of the biggest ones of all that literally just happened in the last couple of days before we taped is that both the two biggest guys behind Google, YouTube,
Yeah.
Larry Page, who is worth, I think, $70 billion, and Sergey Brin, who's worth well over $50 billion. That's such a staggering amount of money, you can't even put it into a quantifiable framework. Simultaneously, they both resigned, and now they dump it all onto the Indian guy. I forget what the last name is, but something like Sundar. That is huge, because what has Q been saying the whole time? Look for the big resignations. Look for the people trying to get out before it all collapses on them. We have had these Google whistleblowers coming out. Project Veritas has been doing an amazing job. I give them all the credit, where these whistleblowers are coming forward and showing that Google is unfairly influencing elections. I mean, we know that they have completely modified YouTube, and I actually believe, and I will say this on camera, even though it's going to be a YouTube video, my calculation based upon the performance of some of my latest videos is that I have a 10-to-1 hit blocker, so that whatever hits I get, it's going to show 10 times less than what I get. That's what I actually think something like that. Because it's way, I mean, you guys know this, right? You guys have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And we're not getting those numbers anymore. And then people are going to say, oh, well, David's all worried about the numbers. It's not about the numbers. It's about suppression of our freedom, right? There's people who want to hear what you guys have to say. They want to hear what I have to say. And now it's become very, very difficult. If you don't manually think, I got to go over to Edge of Wonder, I got to look at the Edge of Wonder YouTube page, I got to type it in on my browser, and then I got to look on what their latest videos are. If you don't love us enough to keep thinking of that and doing it, you're never, ever going to see us.
Yeah.
And
That's exactly true.
And this is very widely known. I mean, Adam Carolla's come out with a movie. I wish he had done it direct to video instead of theatrical. And people are learning about this. And the sidebar on YouTube is now all mainstream media outlets disguising themselves as independent channels, but they're not independent.
Yeah, and I keep seeing like CNN in my feed. No matter how many times I say I don't want to see this,
I know.
it's like it comes back every single time, and I'm like, Anyway, it's very frustrating because this is happening with us too.
Yeah, I mean, there's
a
lot of very serious claims here, and you know, when you get into legalese, one of the terms that they use a lot is tort, T-O-R-T, and tort means interference with business. So they are doing tortious interference, tortious meaning of tort, you know. Tortious interference against business is epidemic because everybody's got to remember we are all in this together. This is not just about the UFO community and guys who talk about Q or Trump or anything like that. It is literally every independent creator who has tried to do stuff on YouTube. Everybody's got a weight tied around their leg. Everybody has had an apocalyptic loss of income, an apocalyptic loss of viewers. And I wrote that all up in my book, D-Class. And it's on my website, which again is divinecosmos.com. It's free. It's a whole book that I wrote for free. And I felt that I had to. I put my book deadline to the side to get that done first. And I put that out because I felt very passionate about this, and I want people to understand what the heck is really going on here. So you better believe with, you know, international investigations going on, FBI investigations going on, Department of Justice, sealed indictments, you better believe that Larry Page and Sergey Brin stepping down is totally related to what they're doing. They are just about out of time. They are on a deadline, and they are reaching the deadline right now.
Well, and David, just recently the YouTube CEO came out and basically said that she was going to increase censorship, not decrease censorship, right? And, there's some of us out there who just think that these social media apparatuses are actually just poison. Like, you can't make poison be anything but poison. Like, they're just going to basically drive themselves into a place where they're non-existent anymore because they're backing these deep state agendas. That's the only reason they exist. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. Bear in mind that when Epstein was arrested, you can look back and see that it was a sealed indictment that they unsealed, okay? So we were told to look for sealed indictments, and we were told that there's many more. One of the latest Q posts at the time we're doing this video that just happened was a shot of Gerard Butler from a movie where he's saying it's going to be biblical. So,
right.
Q says that a lot.
Well, it's true. I believe the scope of what we are going to see will surprise even those of us who have expected quite a bit. And I think that the original plan that the Alliance had to do this over a longer period of time with multiple disclosures, it appears now that they have consolidated this into a much deeper single-shot report. I mean, the rumors are that the report will be over 500 pages long, that it will be much worse than anyone can expect. When you look at the Q stuff, you can see that they are, in colloquial terms, they are very woke, right? All the stuff we talk about is in there.
One of the things that we kind of realized is that, we don't like to take sides. We don't like to say we're on the left or the right. We just focus on the truth.
Exactly.
But what's and some of the people that are more like liberal thinking are probably thinking, yeah, this is good. This is all happening to these conspiracy channels, blah, blah, blah. But we're seeing a true pattern of 1984 here. And this censorship, the bigger that Google and YouTube get, the more control they have, this censorship is going to trickle out into everybody.
Everything.
And one of the things that we realized is that, they're not really censoring the LGBT community here, but if you're talking about the censorship and the suppression in other countries of how other countries are suppressing gay rights and things like that, they're censoring those channels over here. Like YouTube is censoring those American channels. So this is just one example of how this censorship is going to affect everybody as a whole. And it's going to get to the point where we're going to confine ourselves to a box and we can't even speak about anything without worrying about something or offending somebody or whatever. And this censorship is just going to just close in on everybody.
Well, okay. That is certainly the fear.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fear, right?
I don't agree with that opinion. And one of the reasons why is, first of all, I think it's important to understand that my perspective on what's happening with QAnon is probably pretty unique in the sense that I began receiving direct briefings about the Alliance, as I call it, a decade ago, back in 2009. And I have been, for many years, I was the pretty much only person, except for maybe Benjamin Fulford and Veterans Today. I can't really think of anybody else. Even before Corey Good showed up, I was really like one of the only people that was getting briefings. And I was talking about the idea that some parts of the military, the government, and the intelligence community, both in America and worldwide, were positive. I was talking about that back when it was very much a radical concept that hardly anybody could find palatable. Whereas now it's become very clear to many, many people who are following Q that there is an organized effort going on. Q has been incredibly voluminous in the amount of information they've put out, describing that this is a massive operation and that much of the work has already been done. Much of the government and the intelligence structures and the military structures have already been overturned, where there are now people who don't wish to have a genocidal agenda. Another thing I wanted to make sure I got in here is, if you guys remember, in one of my recent articles I talked about, I think it was in the book D class, I talked about this movie, Cold Case Hammarskjöld. Well, that movie is out. It's in distribution. I pulled it up on Apple TV, and my wife and I watched it, and we were absolutely amazed. Because the guy who's doing this, Mads Brugger, he's Danish, he started out doing an investigation into the death of a very well-revered political figure who was the head of the United Nations. Even before Kennedy got assassinated in 1961, he was the head of the United Nations, and he was really trying to do the right thing for the African people. He was a great statesman, a great leader, right up there with Martin Luther King. His name was Dag Hammarskjöld. And he was going through his plane to land and to be involved in a negotiation that would help to bring peace to Africa, and his plane was sabotaged. The movie investigates this cold case of his death. And without giving away the whole movie, he finds very conclusive proof that the plane was shot down, undeniable proof. But then it turns out that the group that shot down Dag Hammarskjöld's plane, it's called CIMER. That stands for South African Institute for Maritime Research. It's a paramilitary organization with direct, the insinuation from, he actually gets insiders to come forward. These are the hot new insiders. They come forward on camera and they say that there was a team supervised by the British intelligence agency MI6 and by the American Central Intelligence Agency, okay, with 5,000 personnel just in the South African division, distributed all throughout Africa, opening up these medical clinics for practically no money, claiming to be helping people when the people that were doing this were not doctors. And the only thing that these medical clinics were really actually doing was injecting people with the AIDS virus.
Oh my gosh.
And here's the guy on camera coming forward as a whistleblower, going into extreme detail about what they were doing, how they were doing it. He felt badly about it. And at the end of the movie, it says that he has now gone into hiding, and he is directly cooperating with the United Nations investigation into these genocidal acts. So if anybody out there watching this, I'll talk to you, the viewer, directly. I'm sorry to have to do this to you, but we got to sit down. We got to have a talk. All right? We got to talk about
Uncle David's lap.
We got to talk about the fact that if you still don't want to believe this, go watch Cold Case Hammarskjöld. That movie is undeniable. It is undeniable that this was run by the intelligence agencies of the US and the UK. It is undeniable that it was massive, that it was still going on until just a few years ago, all through the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s. They were just injecting everybody they could get their hands on with this virus. And they were doing it, the whistleblower said, because they wanted to eradicate black people off the face of the earth. That's crazy. It's crazy.
That is completely insane.
I mean, and that just, when you start thinking about the Ebola virus and everything that's
SARS.
All this stuff. And we recently, one of our recent shows that we did, we were talking about, we've really discovered evidence in how San Francisco was a testing facility, or testing site, I should say, for a lot of new drugs that they were producing and experimenting with. We're talking about the CIA during the 70s and coming into the 80s. And like Bill Cooper's another one who said that, you know, they were using that area as a test for the AIDS virus too, and specifically targeting the black gay community.
Edge of Wonder.
So I want to be clear that I get how disturbing that information is. I get that it's upsetting to you. And a certain percentage of our audience finds it much easier to attack the characters of the messenger than to actually even engage the message. In other words, finding out that they have been injecting blacks in Africa and the LGBT community here in America with the AIDS virus, that they used one of the things they did is the smallpox vaccine in Africa, and then in the U.S. they did the hepatitis B vaccine in those communities. And now it's like they've kind of backed off on it, right? Because the statistical arrival of AIDS in the heterosexual community is now almost non-existent. I mean, it's really gotten almost eradicated. So it appears they've backed off on this, at least in that sense. But that doesn't in any way change our alert status. These people are a cult. They are very wealthy, and they do want to kill billions of people. Now, you as the viewer, you don't have to be engaged in this story. You don't have to fight back. You don't have to put your life at risk. You can remain silent. You can remain safe and not have to do anything. But I do believe that even if you don't agree with all of our conclusions, we should at least be respected, and we, meaning Edge of Wonder, and the work that many others are doing besides myself, as a whole, we should be respected for the sacrifices that we make, the risks that we're taking, the ridicule that we've endured, the ostracism from our families, the loss of income, the loss of prestige. This is a very difficult battle.
I mean, it's really true, you know, like this, I mean, they say ignorance is bliss, and everyone's been living in ignorance for the longest time. Like, the fact that any of this stuff is coming out and things are getting shaken up is like the best possible case scenario at this time. And it indicates that hopefully a larger amount of people will be awakening, and it won't just be us swimming out there in the middle of the ocean with a flag waving it, hoping someone's gonna see that crap. And like, you know, I mean, it's just, you know how it is. You've been doing this longer than us. It is ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, and I want to talk about some other of the positives. The latest article that I wrote at the time that we're taping is talking about the declassification of an anti-gravity patent, a room temperature superconductor patent, and a free energy patent, all by the Navy, all only coming to our awareness by them being published and then acknowledged by media sources this year. And the anti-gravity patent was filed by a mysterious man calling himself Salvatore Pais. And there's only one picture that might be of this guy, but this is very curious because Salvatore Pais released this patent as open source, meaning you do not have to pay royalties to develop this device. The device itself is a triangle that they call a HAWC, which actually stands for Hybrid Air Underwater Craft. Okay? This is a craft that they're saying in the patent flies through the air, flies through space, and flies underwater with equal efficacy.
That's crazy.
And then the chief technology officer of the Navy acknowledged that this is an operational patent. And I go through all that in the article. It is an operational patent. It has been prototyped, it has been tested, and it works. because there's very specific laws about patents in terms of how you file them and what you can say and the claims that you can make. The claim is a very important part of a patent filing. So it's an operational patent. It works. And it actually uses a technology that I was only recently advised about by some of my insiders. Pete Peterson talked for many years about Kenneth Shoulders, and a lot of people called him Kenny Shoulders. And Kenneth Shoulders came up with something that, depending on where you research it, it's either called an EVO, meaning exotic vacuum object, or it's called a charge cluster. Now, this is a very curious bit of science, and it's going to take a little bit of exposition, so if you guys will bear with me, I just want to explain this to you. Is that cool?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. All right. So, Kenneth Shoulders discovered that he could take electrical charge of very high intensity, because it's always a high intensity electrical charge, all this stuff is, and you direct it down a needle to the point on the tip of a needle. And when you direct this energy down to the tip of the needle with very high charge, something happens that breaks the laws of physics. The energy rolls into a ball. Okay? The ball has way more electrical and energetic charge for its size than the normal laws of physics would allow us to think is possible. The ball also repels gravity. It creates its own gravitational field. And, interestingly enough, these balls will form much more easily in the presence of a noble gas such as argon or xenon. And I don't really know why that is yet. I'm sure there's a reason for it that I can uncover with more research. Another very, very fascinating thing about charge clusters that I did not say in my article is that you can run these little guys through something that's radioactive, and it will de-radiate the substance.
No way.
Yes. And so there isn't a whole lot that I can say about this right just yet. I'm sure that my enemies on the inside are very aware of what I'm working on because we're doing it on open lines. But let's just say that I am in a very, very interesting initiative that I hope to be able to talk more about later, where a number of different high technology products and patents, including charge cluster deradiating technology, will be getting out to the public. And I am directly involved in this. I'm not tooting my own horn. And you're going to be hopefully getting a lot more information about that pretty soon. That's all I can really say right now. But I'm very, very excited about what's happening in my life. And that's one of the reasons why I've been so busy and I've had less public communication.
Well, David, I used to be a brand manager, and if you need to brand that product, I recommend calling it David Will Sparks.
Oh my God.
Just kidding. No, that's actually super duper fascinating.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I mean, of course, this is like, I've never heard of anything like that before. And the fact that it breaks the laws of physics, I would want to know exactly how that works and why it's so capable in changing the radiation over. It must be some massive change at a microscopic level that's going on.
There's no question that big tech is suppressing us, and I find it very fascinating that with this Salvatore Pais thing, okay, you have supposedly one man who comes out with an operable anti-gravity flying triangle patent, okay, authorized by the Navy. And then you have the same man who also invents a compact fusion reactor. It has nothing to do with fusion, but that's the way they're selling it. So it's the same guy, and his name is Salvatore Pais. I'll come back to that in a minute. The compact fusion reactor, just to get to that point, when you look at the patent, it's a series of these 4 needles that come to points. And what did I say about Ken Shoulders and the exotic vacuum objects? They are formed by charge running down through a needle. And so this thing spins around and the needles are shooting off all these charge clusters. And you get so many of them that you're generating all this energy. Now, the top nuclear power plant in America, the most productive one, is Palo Verde in Arizona, and that only is in the low range of gigawatts, okay, of how many gigawatts it produces, and I forget if it was 5 gigawatts or 20 gigawatts or something like that, but it's not very much. There's a lot going on in my head right now, so I don't always have everything memorized, but once I start presenting on this in my own videos and lectures, I'll have it memorized. But anyway, a gigawatt is, 1,000 kilowatts, right? And then, if you have 1,000 gigawatts, you have a terawatt, okay? There's nothing that we have that even comes close to a terawatt. The closest that we have is the very best atomic reactors on submarines from the military, and apparently they can do 700 gigawatts. Salvatore Pais is describing a patent that can create up to a terawatt of power in something as small as 0.3 meters in size. And they say in there that the input power that it takes to run the thing is only on the order of megawatts, and that it could even get to the point where it generates its own power and requires no input power whatsoever. That's in the patent. Now let me give you the coup de grace here, okay? Salvatore Pais in Spanish means the savior of our nation. So
I didn't even realize that.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was just like some monk's name
Well,
or
I
something.
thought it was a guy that kind of made up a name, but I didn't know because
Yeah.
we've done a show on this a couple times and whatnot, but I didn't even think about looking into his name, what it meant.
Well, I didn't actually know it on my own. We had a reader on my last article who put it in the comments, and then I added it to the article as an update. But clearly, if there is a person named Salvatore Pais, he was chosen for this. Because if you think about it, it's very bizarre that this story, if your mind can't wrap itself around cold case Hammarskjöld, that they're injecting the AIDS virus, that it was coming from the intelligence agency, in America and in the UK, that it was a massive genocidal operation. They're covering it up with the media, they're covering it up with murder, they're covering it up with lying. If you can't wrap your head around the idea, like you guys were just saying, that big tech is censoring any and all discussion from this, if you're not seeing the connection for why Sergey Brin and Larry Page both just mysteriously resigned simultaneously from their positions while under massive investigation. You got to put these pieces together. You got to say, why would the Navy give us one guy whose name means the savior of our nation, who gives us the anti-gravity flying triangle, and then gives us the reactor that you drop inside the flying triangle to make it run?
Wow.
And nobody has ever covered this story except for this publication called The Drive, and maybe a couple others very briefly, but, what do they want to talk about? They want to talk about impeachment. And to be perfectly honest, there is a total Republican stonewall on impeachment, and they need a two-thirds. The Republicans, two-thirds of the Republicans in the Senate would have to want impeachment for that to ever work. So whether you want it or not, it's never going to happen. And it's a big waste of time because it's going to be obstructed. So, and then even if a president is impeached, he still doesn't get thrown out of office. It's basically just an official rebuking of the president. But he can still remain in office if he wants to. And one thing I think we're pretty clear on about Trump is he's not going to voluntarily step down.
Yeah, that's for sure.